Dream Train is the new album from Brian Cadd. It's the first album in 5 years since we last heard from him with Silver City. And a couple of years before that, the Bootleg Family album, first one in a long, long time. And it's wonderful to have you back with new music, Brian. And this is it.
There it is.
There
it is.
Look,
get on that.
The fact you can still pick it up and put it in your hand too, you know, the physical disc. There's something about this because like my original hearing was on streaming and then going to the physical disc and the quality just is leaps and bounds above.
Right. And you'll be receiving very soon, you'll be receiving your vinyl.
Fantastic. Then the pianola version. I'm very much looking forward to Brian Cadd's pianola version of
yes. So I had to get Peter Sullivan to do that.
At this point in the interview, let's start at the end of the album. The title Dream Train, was that about sort of putting your life into a song title?
And it was also about arriving at this advanced stage. And when I didn't write all the verses at the same time. I did have the third verse first. And then I don't know why, but then I started at the beginning and I wrote the verse about Hollywood. And I realized that was an absolute story of mine. I mean, that's what happened to me. And then after that, it wasn't too hard to drift to Nashville and do the Nashville one. So it was at that point when I got the Nashville verse that I thought this really is all about my journey.
Dream Train is your foray into country, but that song in particular is a bit of a diversion, isn't it? It's the one song that really isn't country. It's a bluesy, swampy, very much an Americana from the South type sound.
Oh, yes, it is. In fact, the chorus itself I actually wrote in Nashville a couple of years ago when I was there. And I couldn't get it to go anywhere, and it doesn't worry me. It's, over all these years I've learned that it'll come to me. It'll just arrive. And I just had it on the computer in a little recording. And that was one of the pieces I found and put into my paper bag when I started the album. And then it just played itself. It just, I played it and I only had one verse. And I just played the verse and the chorus and everything. I, made it into a 3-minute or 4-minute song. And then the boys in the band just went, whoa, come on. And they took it for a big old ride. And even then, it wasn't really fully developed. It wasn't until Kirk Larange played that extraordinary solo, the slide solo was just beyond. And I just thought, okay, now it's an adult. Now it's grown up. It's a complete song. It's got all of its bits. Even though the song, you couldn't count that as songwriting, but, now that as a recording, it's got all of its bits. It's actually working perfectly.
Well, talk about The Truth Is and Hell Out of Dodge at the same time. They're co-writes for you. Cadd co-writes. And we know Hell Out of Dodge has an era of around 2016 with the Bootleg Family. Is The Truth Is a similar vintage?
It's actually a bit earlier than that. That was a song I wrote with Rick Holton and Austin Roberts. And this is it's not really much of a story, but it's a story that we were actually, all three of us were lead singers. And we just had this mad idea one day that we were going to form a group, like the Three Dog Night kind of, different singers. And we wrote that song as part of a couple of songs that we wrote. And with the view of recording them as the three of us. And then mercifully, we didn't feel comfortable with each other when we went into the studio. Not in a bad way, but we just, so one of us would sing that part and the other ones would be going, I wish I could sing that part. So we very quickly abandoned the project, which was very sensible because it would have been terrible to have started the project. And as a result of which, that song sat there, and I love the song. It was so much fun. And it's, you've seen my show. I try to have as much fun as I can in an hour and a half without getting arrested. And I just think that that's a perfect song to play. And it goes wonderfully, as you know. And it would have been a great thing for us to do, but it turns out we weren't supposed to be together, I don't think.
Well, two songs in particular then, Hell Out of Dodge, which is the up-tempo rocker type track, and the one that got away, which was, one of the early singles from this album, are both remakes from that bootleg family era. So you've taken something that was a band record and turned it back into a solo record.
That's exactly right. And I really had, with the bootleg album, we really tried to do it as a band, as the bootleg family would have done it back in the day. So everyone had a go at, putting ideas forward and putting things on and having a go, and et cetera, et cetera. With this album, it was all about the songs. It was just about the song. So there was a whole different approach to both of those tracks from the first one.
And both those tracks individually sound great live for different reasons, because we've got one slow ballad and one up-tempo rocker, but they fit so nicely into the set list. And when, I've had the privilege of hearing those songs in the set list, they don't sound like old songs or songs off a new album or unknown songs. There's a familiarity to them, which I get from the entire album when I listen to all 10 tracks on this album from beginning to end. It doesn't sound like 10 individual Brian Cadd songs. It sounds like Dream Train, the album.
And I'm so glad you said that, because that's one of the things that I always tried to get and didn't always get. So even the bootleg albums that I made, they often sounded like a songbook rather than an artist. Now, it didn't matter because I sang them all, and it didn't kind of matter so much. But the reality is that I hadn't made that many albums that were completely on the same, everything was on the same page, I think I got close with Silver City. I think that they, in their own way, because they were interpreted by a Nashville band, they went that direction. And for the most part, they kind of fitted together. But none of them has ever fitted together as well as the Ginger Man album or this album, in my view.
Yeah. Well, you were revisiting even the Ginger Man album on Silver City with the title track, for example. Is this, something that you've been thinking of doing over the years? Do you go back and listen to your old stuff and think, maybe now's the time to give it a redo?
No, this was absolutely was. We're in the studio. This is that album. We're in the studio in Nashville. We had all these Nashville players, Dan Dugmore and people like that, who are amazing heroes of mine. And Mark Moffat, who's an Australian producer, Mark, and he said to me, now, if we do this album, you've been bullying people with your piano for 50 years. So I'm going to have you just go into that booth with all your lyrics. You're not playing anything. You just sing as though they were a band and you were singing lead in the band. I'd never done that before. It was the strangest feeling to not play and sing. But once I got over it, at the end of the first day, I just was, God, this is so free. And that's why I think I enjoyed that album as well. But the story about Silver City was that during a break, Mark went into the kitchen. They were all having coffees and doing whatever they're doing. And he said one of them was on their phone Googling me and listening to songs. And then on the last day, we had about an hour over that we didn't use. And Dan Dugmore and the guitar player, the acoustic guitar player, came up and said, would you just do Little Ray of Sunshine if we played it, just us played it? And we've got an idea of how it should feel and whatever. He said, doesn't matter, we just want to record it. We've got some time. And that's what they came up with. And of course, once Robert heard that, it was, no, it's got to be on the album and it's got to be the title of the album. And he was right. But it is rather a not very matching recording. compared to the rest of them on that album. But that was because they didn't know who I was, they hadn't a clue who I was. So they just went on and found some of the old stuff, and they loved that track.
Dream Train opens with such a wonderful song, You Know What to Say, and that was the first time we heard anything from this record. When was that song created?
It was finished quite recently. It was one of the other ones in the paper bag, so to speak, that didn't have all its stuff, but it had that great chorus, and I just knew that chorus would work. And what happened was, I was somewhere and it was fairly late at night, and there was a bunch of blokes all around having beers, we're all, as we tend to do. And this guy, who I'd never met before, he was just in the group, he started talking to one of his mates, and he just kind of broke down. He just said, I can't handle it, she just reduces me to ashes every time she wants to. She just knows exactly what to say to bring me down or to lift me up and make me love her again. And then this went on. And I'm like every other songwriter, I'm a natural eavesdropper. So I was listening to whatever somebody else was telling me, but I'm really listening to this guy. And I went back to the hotel afterwards and I wrote down what became the song. That wasn't anything to do with my set of experiences, but gosh, it was a very important thing for him. And it was a lovely thing to happen for me. I know it sounds weird to say it's lovely, but it just gave me this wonderful little piece of canvas to draw something on. It was fabulous.
The songs on the Dream Train album, about 50% of them are co-writes. So how did that happen? We've got a couple of the Cadd Holt ones that we've already talked about, a Cadd Turner, a Cadd Colton, a Cadd Newton, a Cadd Roberts in there. When does a song go from being a Brian Cadd song to you bringing someone else to help you finish it off?
Well, it has to be about the time that I spent in Nashville. Even though I wrote some of those songs recently or more recently, I spent 5 years there writing with wonderful, wonderful writers. And it just got to be that I was actually going back to school, to be very honest, because I was learning tricks about songs that I never ever should. You did. And they, because they was mostly really, really serious and mostly very successful country songwriters. So their version of life was quite different from a rock guy or a pop guy, So I remember the first day I ever wrote with Austin Roberts and another guy, and I was really intimidated because they both had all sorts of hits from all sorts of people. Well, lovely blokes. And I sat there and I had piano there, and I was waiting to kind of chip in. They'd talk about baseball for a while, and then they'd have a couple of coffees, and then they'd write a couple of lines and stuff. It was quite bizarre. Anyway, so I'm not sure you'll understand this unless you know music, but I got to the stage where they'd basically written the verse and the chorus, and I'd thrown in a few lines and they'd very gently thrown them out. Anyway, so we get to the point where they said, now we need to have a little bridge. And I said, I've got a thought for the bridge. And I played the end of the chorus, and then I went up there and hit this chord, which was a major seventh chord, right, which is perfectly acceptable in pop music. In fact, I don't know that Burt Bacharach would have ever had a hit if he didn't use major seventh. But there was this silence when I hit it, and they looked at each other, and one of them looked at me and said, we don't have them kind of chords here. Because it was too jazzy, it was too clever. So I had to tone it down to a regular chord, not a one with a major seventh in it. And that stayed with me the whole time I lived in Nashville. I was terrified sneaking in another one of them clever chords that they don't have there. I think that's an interesting story.
This is the album, Dream Train. And how many albums have you done over the years? Can you actually put a definitive number on the number of Brian Cadd albums?
I think it's 26 if I include if I include the one group album and I include the one accident.
We've got all the shows coming up with you by yourself, and then another batch of shows later in the year with Glenn Shorrock again.
Oh, yes, yes. Somebody's got to pay his mortgage, you know. No, we just love it. I mean, it's not something we do very often, as you know. And we tend to do like a weekend, you know, Friday and Sunday, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and have a great time and just be very naughty boys for the old boys, very naughty old boys for the weekend. And then we go home and apply ointments and medical solutions. But I don't know that we can give it up. I suppose we'll give it up when we can't get on stage anymore or whatever. But right now, and for the last God knows how many years, we've had the best time on stage. We know each other so well, same with Russ, but we know each other so well that we can absolutely insult the other person just endlessly and never seem to run out of insults. It's fantastic.
Well, let's hope that on this tour you have as many new insults as you have many new songs.
Thank you.
Dream Train, the album that follows up Silver City, the album which came after Bulletproof, the album. And I could go all the way back to Ginger Man, but we're running out of time. So, Brian, great to see you.
And you too, Paul. Thanks so much.